All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode of The Pursuit of Ownership. It is Peyton here. I'm here with Tyler, and we have a follow-up interview today with a guest we had on about 6 months ago. Tyler, you want to touch on a little bit more about what we're going to be addressing today?
Yeah, so I'm really excited to have Kevin back on here and super excited to finally be doing some follow-up episodes. So, the whole TPO thing we started back in January, and we're recording some of our first episodes at VOD. And, I was just kind of reaching out to people that I knew kind of early on, and Kevin was certainly one of them. And he was someone that I met through the various channels and circles that we're in. And, he's just one of those guys out there. It's an ambitious dental student and was always going after it from his like D1, D2 year. And to finally seeing him, getting out of dental school and going into ownership and doing his thing is just really awesome. And he's been doing it all through COVID. And so, I've been kind of unplugged from his journey, and there's just been so much noise going on. So, when you reached out to him about doing a follow episode, I just thought that was awesome. So yeah, I'm really excited for the audience to get caught up on the story.
Yeah. And it's just really cool to hear people early in ownership. I feel like a lot of times those different things that you run into in early ownership, you forget about over time.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're 1 or 2 years out, you might forget about the nitty-gritty details that you experienced when you were first in the practice. So I think this interview does a very good job of highlighting some of those things that he has seen in his first 2 months of ownership.
Yeah, for sure. So let's go ahead and get into it. All right, ladies and gents, welcome back to another exciting episode of The Pursuit of Ownership. This one's pretty special. We're doing a follow-up episode. I've now been doing this podcast long enough to have follow-up episodes, like 6-month follow-up, which is pretty cool. And we got a very special guest, someone that I've been following for some time. We've been friends for a little while here, and he is a current ambitious dental student, or former ambitious dental student, who is now an ambitious dentist. Yeah, I know. I'm not used to saying it for some of these people, Kevin Reardon, a very honored guest, who you've probably heard from fairly recently. If you've been following the podcast, last time we were talking about mailers, and he was, looking at different opportunities. And sure enough, he has followed through with one of them, and I am super excited to hear about his journey. Kevin, welcome back.
Thanks for having me back, Tyler.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
It's been a whirlwind.
Yeah, I'm sure it has. I think, the last time we spoke was pre-COVID and pre-graduation for you. So there have certainly been a lot of developments, both local and global, for your life. So, we definitely have a lot of catching up to do. I am curious a little bit about, how COVID has affected your transition. But I think, the world of transitioning out of dental school and into a dental practice that you own is enough of a pandemic in and of itself. So I want to hear all about it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, thanks for having me again. It was definitely a lot. And I don't need to talk too much about COVID. We know how that affected the end of my school and the transition, but I guess from a transition standpoint, the only big effect was I got a big discount on the practice.
Cool.
Well, not a big one. I have 50,000 discount on the practice for that, which I don't know. I feel like now that everything's bouncing back, I feel like there was this window where they're getting discounts, but now that everything, or at least around in my area, practices have bounced back to 100% of capacity. I don't think, I don't think that'll be too much more of those discounts going around. So I think I got it in a good time. Last time we talked, I was looking at a couple of practices from my mailer campaign and ended up finding one. Kind of a lucky / terribly unlucky situation. Yeah. My doctor that I am taking over for, we had met for lunch. He was wanting to retire a little bit later in a few years. We talked about some sort of transition down the road. And then he got back to me right in March saying that he got had a diagnosis of multiple myeloma and really good prognosis, and treatable, but he was going to be needing to, take a rest and focus on his health. So
yeah, of course.
Practice kind of fell into my lap really nicely because of that. He had interviewed his broker, or not broker. Yeah. His broker had interviewed or brought, 4 other people to the practice. But I guess something I said at our lunch when from the follow-up to the mailer struck him, and wow. I guess I made a good impression. So ended up going with me, and I'm now just finished my 2nd month of ownership.
Wow.
Here, so
Man, that is something.
Yeah, it really is.
It's so cool to see people on like the other side of the fence, like that, and just like waving from the other side, like, oh my gosh, it looks so nice over there.
No, it's definitely, I mean, we have our own set of problems on this other side, but I would not trade mine for yours any day of the week.
Oh gosh.
Honestly, like remembering that's like such an important thing for me, that anytime I get stressed or I feel like, oh man, I'm going back to the office again, or oh, I feel like tomorrow is going to be a really stressful day. And then I have all this other, business stuff to do on top of that, and staff training and stuff. And then every time I get kind of stressed, I literally just think, I'm like, I spent 4 years in dental school, just about every waking hour thinking about how I was going to do and preparing for this. Like, this is exactly what I asked for. And I mean, I'm ready for it. Like, of course there are challenges that are a pain, and not that I prepared for. There's not enough podcast episodes for you to prepare you for every single challenge that you're going to get, at least not yet. But
we're working on it. It takes time.
Right. But I feel like this is it. I mean, I'm going in and there's plenty of problems, but it's all right. The ownership problems to me are the best kind of problems, and everything's just a reminder that I'm really extremely grateful and lucky to be in this situation, to have gotten in ownership as early as I am. And as soon as cash starts flowing a little bit better, I'm gonna be doing a lot better. But still in the early transition, still those early transition blues a little bit, but things are going really well and the practice is growing. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So catch us up a little bit as to, I know you mentioned that you came across this in one of your mailers. And I think the last time we spoke, this was coming from your second round of mailers. You kind of talked about that whole strategy. So kind of walk us through, how, you heard back from this dentist and you ended up meeting with them, and a little bit more about that process of like, visiting the practice, figuring out that it was going to match your vision. I know last time you were looking for a fee-for-service practice, and that was kind of like what you had in mind, and you had some particular ideas. So kind of walk us through that whole process of just analyzing this and figuring out this is something that potentially you wanted to buy.
All right. So when he responded to my mailer, he told me right off the bat that he didn't have a transition opportunity available for me, but I still wanted to go meet him because he said maybe down the road there would be one. So I went and grabbed lunch with him. And when I took a tour of the practice, I was like, dang, this would be like a really nice practice to, I wish this was available, because it was high on my list of ones that I toured. It didn't need a lot of updating. It was right in the heart of town. It's right where I want it, exactly where I targeted, the heart of where I targeted. So everything worked out perfect, and it's a nice busy strip, but not like on a highway. So location was great. Practice seemed updated, and predominantly fee for service. So it kind of checked all those boxes. And when he got back to me saying, are you still interested? I'm sure you probably have your life figured out by now, which I didn't at all. For me, it was like all systems go. I mean, I asked for the financials. He got those over to me pretty quickly. And then for me, it just became like whatever needs to happen to get this done. I'm not going to let this practice slip through the cracks, because I know this does fit my long-term vision better than anything else. And that's most important to me. So the numbers were working out. Practice was doing around 575 in collections annually, plus or minus. It was pretty stable. And for me, I was looking at it as there's a lot of growth areas for it. So when I was looking at the numbers, they did 8 quads of scaling last year. And now we're in a pretty nice area, but it's not that nice. I mean, it's not nice enough where literally no one has perio. So I knew there was something a little fishy there.
Sure.
And then, I guess I don't really know where I was going with that. Analyzing practice. To me, it was just like this practice I knew was going to work, unless the numbers of the practice were like, 40% employee costs or something like that, or they're just a lease that was just ridiculous. Other than just like some major red flag, then it was going to be, I was going to do whatever I needed to do. So I went to Wells Fargo, and I was big about backup plans as well. So I went to Wells Fargo. They initially told me they were going to be able to finance 100% of the purchase price.
What was the timeline on this? Just to give us, time frame.
Yeah. So this was March when it started. We started talking to Wells Fargo in March. So we picked up the call. I already had a banker lined up that I was working with. And And so we kind of in March, and this was like the start of COVID. He was like, no, things are looking really good. In fact, interest rates are low. It's a good time for you. It's all going to work out. So I was like, okay, I don't believe you, but that's awesome if it is. The practice was going for 435. And then I was going to get it probably 50,000 of working capital. So was looking at 485, and he told me no problem. But anyways, in the behind the scenes, I was talking to my parents and some friends and family about, doing some sort of financing if this fell through, and if the seller financing fell through, because I knew that those were going to be options. And the financing did fall through a little bit. The Wells Fargo backed down all the way to 325. So I had to make up a pretty significant difference. And although the seller was 100% totally ready and willing and wanting to do seller financing because it would have sped the process up a little bit, the seller side broker, or the seller side CPA, was a major pain for both. Yeah, honestly did a disservice to the guy this guy's sick. He's like doing chemo treatments to prolong his working in the practice. And the doc's like, no, you can't carry the note here. This is risky. So this guy like pushed back his stem cell transplant because the CPA advised him to do that. So anyways, I ended up getting it done. I have I got the difference made up through my dad, and I'm paying him back at a higher interest rate than my Wells Fargo loan. And I don't know. I don't think he would require me of this, but for me, getting loan from friends and family is not fun. That's the only debt that I'm really not okay with having.
Yeah, it's tough.
I already owe my parents so much for everything that, all their support and everything through my life. The last thing I want is to just like kind of string them out on this. So I'm hoping to pay back theirs within 2 years at the latest.
Yeah, for sure. I was about to say, like, you can't even really put a number on that kind of thing, and to have to ask them to ante up more money for another opportunity. But this is obviously one that you can really give some returns to them, and I think a lot of times when family are willing to help out for those things, they don't really expect there to be a really quick return on that. Like, that's not exactly what they're looking at it like. But I think it's awesome that they were able to do that for you, and I know you're going to take care of them.
Right. And they understood exactly the thing, that it wasn't really a risky investment,
not at all.
My dad and I looked through it, and that it was the practice is primed to grow, and the transition was going to be a smooth one. And even if it wasn't, I had my dad there, which I haven't had to use at all. But, just looking at it, and they were ready for me, and I, didn't really have to pitch it, but it was like, this is going to allow me to pay this back quicker. This is going to allow me to just do so much more. So it was like, to me, it's a no-brainer. And I was like, I'll do it. They didn't ask for that higher interest rate. They didn't ask for 2 years. They just said, put something together and we'll do it. But I'm like, for me, that was important not to go back. One thing that I said on the last podcast, probably no one remembers, but I have my dad in dentistry, but I always had this big, like, kind of buck the trend of like, I didn't want there to be this, oh, well, your dad's a dentist, so you got lucky that you can just go into his practice.
Sure.
And I do eventually want to buy into my dad's practice, but I wanted to I wanted to prove that that I could do it all without, leaning on that. And even though I didn't end up getting it done without his, bridge loan there, I, like I said, wanted to get it off my plate as soon as possible, get that loan off my shoulders. But
yeah, for sure.
I think that just goes to show, like, I think a lot of people would have looked at that obstacle and just been like, oh, I guess I can't do it. But you were kind of willing to, like, you looked at it and you're like, all right, like, what other options do I have? Like, how can I make this work? And I think it's cool that you were willing to, exercise that option if you had it.
Yeah, I think that's like the key. That just brings up an important point about like vision and knowing where you want to go in the long run. Because if you didn't have any idea where you wanted to go, you would probably be more concerned about what scrubs you were going to buy, or like the little menial things, because you don't really, it's so hard. I don't know what I want to do. So I guess I can just focus on the little things that don't really matter, because that's all you can control.
Hey, scrubs matter. Wait a minute.
Scrubs matter.
Scrubs do matter.
The cloth.
I'm actually really big on fabric, and also I'm not wearing my monogrammed scrubs, but I think that's branding. It actually does matter. Everything's
got to do shirt and tie every day at Creighton, so any scrubs is good for me.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, very cool.
Yeah, what is? Are you a scrubs guy? Or are you like shirt and tie?
Yeah, I'm scrubs. I just bought all my figs right before there was that whole boycott figs thing, which I'm still like kind of don't really know what to make of that. But I'm like, listen, these are comfortable.
Such a weird thing. It's such
I'm
a
just
weird
going for
controversy,
it.
but I get it.
Scrubs and a white coat.
Sorry. That's a tangent. We're getting in the weeds there.
Cut that out.
No. That's on me. That's on me. I got defensive about Scrubs, and that's where we got. But no. I totally I respect what you're talking about with the vision there. So actually, on that subject, so I can recall that we were talking about you wanted an FFS practice and everything. Can you kind of give us some more specifics about what your vision is, what you're trying to take your practice to, and then kind of wind back and talk a little bit more about where your practice is at. I know you talked about what it's already producing and everything, but as far as operatory number, what do we got staff wise? Kind of catch us up on that stuff too.
Yeah, for me, I know like long term, I really want a large group practice. I have this vision for a fee-for-service practice, a family practice, where pretty much everything is done under one roof. I'd like to refer out as minimally as possible. And that just comes from just kind of analyzing like what are the biggest problems to patients, one of the biggest headaches as providers, and just how can we solve a lot of that. Already I'm realizing like referring patients, patients don't want to get referred. And then even when they do, tracking the referrals and making sure they're getting done, and then coordinating the schedules like, oh, you're going to go see this surgeon, then you're coming back, and then we're going to send them back. And then for some reason I have to section this bridge. The periodontist for some reason can't section the bridge. And there's just a lot of headaches on my end and the patient's end. And for me, so large group practice, I would love to have like a big, something like a 30 operatory practice, where either we have a bunch of super GPs where everyone kind of has their own niche, and I'm doing all the endo and someone else is doing all the ortho, a GP is doing, or bring in specialists and kind of work with that. My dad has a practice in town. He's probably got another 5 to 8 years left in the tank. My brother is a 4th-year dental student at Creighton right now. And then my sister is applying. She's going to be a D1 next year. Not going to if that gets in.
That's the whole squad right there.
So I would love. I think the idea of us all working, families treating families, I think that's extremely powerful. Yeah, Brandon, it would be so cool if it can work out for all of us working together. Then I think that's just the ideal model of dentistry. And I literally cannot be convinced otherwise. So I'm so focused on that. To me, it's like, so this practice that I'm at has 4 ops, which obviously isn't 30, but to me, it's just, it was never going to be 30. So all I can do is just keep my eyes open for other practices. And that's what I am doing. Even though I couldn't get an extension on my loan from Wells Fargo, I still am in contact with a few other practice owners in the area, and I'm planning on doing some sort of mailer campaign again to see if I can't buy another practice sometime within the next couple of years, 2 years.
Okay, so that's all right. That's an amazing vision, by the way. I really love that. Families treating families. That's beautiful. So if the vision is a 30-op practice, so I'm assuming that you're making some moves in the next few years in order to eventually leverage a de novo practice that's going to have these 30 ops that you're planning on, or what's kind of the path to that?
Yeah. So I think the key, I keep saying the key, like I'm DJ Khaled here. There's a,
give them the keys.
There are a key to that I kind of try to, when I'm planning my vision and thinking about what I want, I try to leave as many paths as possible. And so that's what I said about like the loan, like, okay, well, Wells Fargo, like, let's see what seller's financing. And then also what else I could do with friends and family so I can get to the same end goal. And with here, a de novo, scratch built out practice, combining whatever practices I end up finding out here is one option. My dad's practice, he has a good bit of land that could be built on, but that would take, it would be about the same. I don't know. I haven't run the numbers yet because we're not really at that point. But it's potentially possible. I just threw 30 ops there for a while, but it would be a pretty major build up. My dad's only has 5, but he has a basement. He has land to expand. So I don't really exactly know how it's going to work, but I'm ready to pivot and kind of go wherever the opportunity is.
Wow. Yeah. That's amazing, man. That is a fantastic vision. And, with you having so many family members that are going to be practicing at the same time, your brother, who I'm sorry to hear is a D4, it's a terrible time to be doing it. I commiserate with him.
Imagine if he was D3.
Oh yeah. Oh gosh, even worse. I don't know. I haven't really figured out which one's worse yet, Peyton. I
You're
don't know.
closer, but it feels further as a D4.
I feel way further away, especially during this time. But yeah, again, tangents. But yes, your vision is amazing, Kevin, and I think you found a pretty cool opportunity to get into that. So what do you see for this practice? Where are sort of some of the areas of growth that you've been mentioning?
So I got in and I did a little bit of a chart audit, but it was paper charts. And so that was tough. And honestly, I'm going to go straight up. I didn't do a good job of that, but it didn't matter because I knew, the numbers were making sense. And it turns out I found what has to be one of the most conservative dentists of all time, which was interesting because like his crown to 3 surface or 4 surface ratio was like pretty like average, but he's just like waiting on I would say like the average patient that I see at a recall could benefit from like 4 crowns.
Wow.
Yeah. So I'm not just throwing that all in their face right now. And then, I mean, there's like a lot of undiagnosed perio that he was kind of just watching. And so there's a lot, the room for growth is doing the restorative dentistry that needs to be done over the next few years and then seeing kind of where things shake out. So trying to project where this practice can grow to, I honestly have no idea until I get a few more months of production and just seeing what is stable. Historically, he had done like super variable production. So like in February of 2019, he did 25,000. And then in October last year, he did 67.
Okay.
So like the practice, it was not a very consistent practice. And so I don't really know where things are growing, but for me, it's just getting better systems for co-diagnosis with my hygienists.
Great.
Getting the lowest hanging fruit to me was figuring out the hygiene need of the practice. And I reckon that I need, after some crunching some numbers, that I'll need to add 15 hours of hygiene a week easily, at least to kind of support the hygiene needs of the patients and the increased perio that we're going to be seeing.
Yeah.
And then for me, I really like surgery, and that's a little part of my vision is I really like implants, and I know I'm going to be doing that. And so I also enrolled in the Chicago implant course. That's like a 300-hour, it used to be the maxi course, but something happened there. So I'm going to hopefully add implants as well within the next 12 months.
Okay. Wow. So a lot of internal growth going on there.
100% internal. Yeah. I'm signing up for Swell just because I know there's I'm a new face. I'm young. I look like a child. I have no facial hair.
I mean, look at us, man. I mean,
I get asked on a pretty regular basis if I'm old enough to drive. So I kind of wanted to get ahead of that and get some reviews out there to say how great I was. So I've been paying some people to lie about me online. So we're getting Swell going. But other than that, I have really absolutely no plans for external marketing because of how much I just want to just focus on the internal at this time. Yeah. Worth noting that this was predominantly fee for service. He was in the process of dropping Cigna as I took over. And then that was like 3% of his practice. And I am preparing to announce that I am out of network with Delta, as he was not. I tried kind of getting away with not announcing it. A lot of people on some fee for service practices had advised, don't send the letter, but we were getting so much confusion, so much pushback about the assignment of benefits that going directly to the patient that I am going to get on top of that. But yeah, so I will remain completely out of network, which I'm sure will churn some patients there, but we've grown, the practice is already growing in these first 2 months. So I'm not too worried about it.
Yeah. Wow. That's fantastic, man. So another thing I'm kind of curious about is, just coming from the perspective of someone that is, coming up on graduation soon, is going to be going out into practice. What was that transition like for you? I mean, I know that you got a pretty good amount of clinical exposure over there at Creighton. But what was that like? I mean, you're coming right out into a practice you own. So, I mean, you got to kind of walk me through some of those first few weeks.
Yeah, it was pretty weird. The transition. I mean, I think anyone will go through that. I did get a good experience at Creighton with some specialty procedures with some, like 3 or 4, I think 4 molars for endo. And I did 11 implants I got to place with my own hands, guided, freehand,
Cool.
all the above. So that was great. And that's going to serve me well, I'm sure. But the clinical speed, maybe someone did more crowns than me. I know that they did. I would say for people wondering what the transition is like, it's going to be slow. And I was scheduling myself for an hour and a half for crowns. And even at the very beginning, even that felt like I was rushed. But, the clinical speed, I think that's like one of the things that I was most worried about, that I know everyone seems to be worried about as a dental student, because you're doing an MO for 3.5 hours sometimes. But it's just something that you get through. And it's like, it's a problem for 1 month. There's no other problems in our lives that only last a month that we spend so much time worrying about. We spend
great.
4 full years of dental school worrying about this month that isn't even that bad. Like, it's not like it's
that's great.
the month that makes or breaks you. Everyone gets by and everyone gets over that hump. So it's just like this little hill in the distance that seems like a mountain that everyone worries about.
Mm-hmm.
And then ask any dentist 3 months out of school and they're like, yeah, I can crown's a crown and fillings are fillings. And I mean, my speed still has lots of room for improvement. I'm by no means a clinical master. I'm by no means a super fast person. And by no means, I'm not doing multiple columns or anything like that. So it's just one step at a time. And, I'm getting better every day, or trying to, at least. And
so you're saying
what I focus on.
So you're saying I shouldn't be making career decisions based off my fear that I won't be fast enough?
No, well, you make career decisions off you got a lot of problems for yourself that you're going to have to deal with. I don't know how you're going to survive, but for the general listener out there, you're going to be much better than Tyler here.
Yeah, no question about it. I only say that because, and we talked about it on the show before, but I feel the need to keep drilling it. No pun intended. I especially with being the COVID class, I think a lot of my classmates and students around the net talk a lot about, having missed this amount of time and not really having the experience and the reps to be able to go out and be productive. And I love how you're putting that, like, don't worry about that month, because everyone's going to experience that month. And kind of looking past, what other challenges are actually going to persist past that month. I think that's what's really important. So I really love the way you put that. That's beautiful.
And I know that it gets kind of talked about, like, oh, do you feel like you've hit your clinical limits? Do you feel like you're not growing clinically anymore? I don't want to say I was never worried about that. I just know that, and maybe it's because I was so worried about that. But for me, I knew that was always going to be a priority, and I wasn't really worried about making the time to take CE, because that was so important to me that I didn't. I get really frustrated when a case comes in and I don't have the answer. And so for me, taking implants first, just because it was absolutely just killing me referring out implants. And I know that I have the case. I'm ready to do it. And I'm talking to reps to get the systems in place to do this, just slam dunk ones. But my first month, I referred out like close to 20 implants, and it just was killing me. So I'm going to do that, and then I have plans to take potentially. I'm leaning towards taking coys for a continuum as well, but we'll see how this implant class goes first.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, no, I'm glad that you're. One thing that happened, I know with George in particular, is he felt that, coming right out of school and into his practice, he was focusing so much on growing the business that there just was no real emotional and temporal availability for him to actually engage himself clinically. I don't think he pulled a tooth for like a year. And so it's nice to hear that you still have that sort of flexibility to be able to invest in yourself clinically and actually appreciate your skills a little bit more instead of just sort of referring things out and trying to, catch up.
Right. Well, George was doing a lot of things at his practice that I'm not doing at mine. And it's just different strokes for different folks, I guess. But for me, and that's another thing, is like, I think a lot of new grads might benefit from hearing is, you hear a lot of stuff from different people about what's the right way to practice and how you do this and how you do that. And, you got to see 2 columns and this is how you stage it. And you got to do this type of scheduling, or, if you don't have this many hygienists, you're screwing up. So really just take things at your own pace, at your own timeline. And the really only way you can know what your pace and what timeline you should be working on is if you do have a vision to work with. And for me, I'm only doing 1 single column of my own restorative. I'm working on having 2 hygienists. We have 1 right now, and then 1 that comes in for 1 full day a month, working on trying to get her, like I said, to 15 or 20 hours a week. So, a lot of people would look at my practice and be like, oh my gosh, if you did 2 columns, you could do so much more. If you had this hygiene more hygienists, you could be so much more profitable. But for me, I know the type of practice that I want to have, and I know the feel of my practice, and nothing against someone who is having, expanded function dental assistants do a lot of the work. But for me, that's just not the feel that I wanted for my own practice. And I'm looking at the numbers of the practice that it's doing and the profitability of the practice, and it's totally working for me. And I know that we're only going up from here. So like, I haven't really felt, I felt a little bit of like this weird external pressure. I couldn't put my finger on like, why am I feeling like this inadequacy about like not doing 2 columns and not working and not get, oh man, if I don't get this other hygienist and I'm really screwed. But I'm looking at it and I'm like, okay, well, how much is enough? I mean, I'm happy right now. If I can't be happy with this right now, then I got some greed issues, I think. So working on your own pace and as long as you know how you want your practice to be. And as long as you're able to pay your bills and feed your family, if you've got one, try not to let those other things that you hear about necessarily cloud what you should be doing or make you put that pressure on you. Like you feel like you should be doing stuff that you maybe doesn't matter if you are.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. Go ahead, Payton. Sorry.
I think another thing too is, I mean, you've chose that you want to work in a fee-for-service model, and that kind of affords you that luxury. Like you don't need to be running around all day with like a chicken with your head cut off. Like you can work at your own pace and still, do well for yourself. So I think it's cool that you've identified that and you're okay with it. I think that's very acknowledgeable for sure.
Right. And if anything, of just a commercial for fee-for-service, like I have run the numbers and like our hygienist is, she's great. People would think people would look at her compensation and think that she's maybe overpaid, but our hygiene, we make a lot of money on hygiene. It's a profitable hygiene department. And that's something that I don't even know if it's possible, without being in network. I don't even know if you can have that profit. I know you can have profitable hygiene, but not profitable with as little work as we're doing here. Like, we don't have to sell the fluoride and the whitening and all that stuff in order to get hygiene profitable. We're just profitable if someone comes in for a pro fee and an exam and does 4 bite wings, and we're making money on that. And that's just kind of a commercial. If you haven't considered fee-for-service, or you're super overwhelmed by the idea of checking three hygienists while you're doing your own 2 columns of dentistry, then maybe you're the type of person who would benefit from a fee-for-service model where you can be profitable with doing a little less production.
Yeah, I mean, like, you also don't have to, you don't have to fully commit to doing fee-for-service. Like you can just get rid of some of those PPOs that maybe aren't as reimbursing as well as you want. And I mean, you might lose some patients initially, but you're still seeing some of that benefit of the fee-for-service reimbursement.
For sure.
Yeah. So go ahead.
Yeah. Sorry. Me and Payton, we're going to butt heads, man. We're having a hard time in this interview. We're just chomping in the bit to respond to Kevin here. We're just not being nice about it. But what I was going to say is, I feel that when comparing the FFS model and sort of that hygiene driven PPO type model, we're kind of talking about 2 different things in terms of productivity from hygiene, right? So like in your model, you're getting more money based off of what the hygienists are actually producing and what's being billed for what the hygienist is actually doing with their hands. And for you, that's working out great. Like they're producing that amount of money off of what they're doing, and that's profitable enough for you to be happy with where you're at. And I commend you for that 100%. In sort of the more, let's add hygienists, let's have, more patients coming in, let's have more flow, let's diagnose more dentistry. Ultimately, that's how that profitability is being looked at, is because now there's more restorative or whatever else being put on the table because we're seeing more patients. We're able to diagnose more dentistry and there's more there to be done. It's not looking at the profitability of hygiene based off, what they're actually doing, bite wings, SRP.
Right. Totally.
Yeah, and I love that you bring that up, and I think the underlying principle of it that I think is very valuable is that it's not about, let me look at these people and see what they're doing and let me emulate exactly what they're doing and let me let their success define my own. And what happens with that almost invariably is that even if you do it as well as they do it, there's not that same fulfillment. And I think what you're experiencing, and I really respect, is that you are fulfilling a vision of your own. And you're obeying your own principles and your own way of doing practice, and you're seeing it work for you. And the fulfillment that you're having is a lot more authentic for that. And so that's why I like 100% co-sign your message there. It's wonderful.
I think it's worth also adding that It's really important. As much as I am doing that, like it's extremely important for me to try to be as critical as I can with myself and be like, well, like I said, I am trying to add hygiene, so it's not like I'm not trying to do that.
Right.
I was just saying for instance, but to challenge yourself and be like, okay, am I making an excuse that like, oh, well, I'm profitable here, I'm happy here, this is really what I want to do, or is like, man, should I be ramping things up? Would more efficiency be better? Because one thing I'm doing, like I told you, like these patients are coming in, they've got a lot of work that needs to be done, and I'm addressing it. I'm telling you, it's my job. I'm a doctor. I got to tell you what's going in. Some people, I've asked a lot of people advice on how to handle that specific situation of like someone walks in, they have 5 crowns. They haven't, in their mind, they haven't had a cavity in 10 years, they say. So it's like, oh, how do you address that? Yeah. And there's people like, you got to just tell them everything, get an intro of a camera, blow it up on them. And if they leave, they leave. Like
you tell them what you say. Yeah.
Again, that just doesn't work for me. I in my mind, and I've said this before, I don't think on this podcast, but like for someone that's had work that is being overlooked, for example, perio, if there's someone that's coming to this practice every 6 months and they have had perio disease for the last 6 years, for me to come in and just say, you need these crowns and you have this perio disease, and it's either we do the perio or I'm sorry, I can't treat you. Like, to me, that's just like a completely unacceptable thing for this patient who had no idea there was nothing wrong. So just kind of dialing that back, and it's like the patient thinks they have nothing wrong. I'm seeing that they have a lot of things wrong. I don't want to scare people away. And I also know he's been watching it for this long. There's some things that, let's just take this one bite at a time. And I'm doing plenty enough dentistry. For the way I've been taking it is I'm doing enough dentistry. I'm staying more than busy. Just, when you do this conservative dentistry, there's so many emergencies because you've got patches and patches and patches that are just breaking off.
Yeah.
So I'm staying busy and just, again, challenging yourself to say, okay, am I being scared and looking at this and just like being afraid to tell the patient what they need to hear? But to me, I just felt like this was like a middle ground of like, I'm not going to be the diagnostician that my previous doc was, because I am who I am. I will diagnose what I diagnose. But at the same time, it's kind of like unfair of me to just expect these people to meet that expectation. So kind of just meet in the middle there and compromise. And again, challenge yourself. Are you making an excuse for yourself, or
right,
or are you being true to who you are? And that's kind of
I mean, I think as long as your resolve is not fear-based, which is what you just kind of mentioned, is like this fear of like, am I going to be scaring my patients away or whatever? I think for you, I mean, it's like you are doing your job as a dentist and you're identifying problems that are there, but you're presenting it to them in smaller bites such that, you can protect your recall pool, and, you're wanting to retain them. And that if they're staying there, they're going to stay in your care. These problems are going to be attended to in due time. It's just, you just don't want to throw it all at them at once. And I think that's a realistic compromise. And I think you're driving that with logic and consideration for your patients. And I think that's sound.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. You just got to build that trust. And then you can move forward from there.
Yeah, it's trust.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
There actually was, because to try to catch up on COVID, they were doing 45-minute hygiene appointments, which I think is pretty standard. But for me, I again, this is going to go buck some trends. I said I want an hour for all hygiene appointments moving forward, because I want to have to build that trust. When I'm about to tell someone they have, $10,000 worth of work to be done, or if not now, over the course of the next couple of years, we're going to be chipping away at. They want to trust. I want to get them to trust me. So building that extra time in has been a huge investment of mine that I hope I'll be reaping over the next few years.
Yeah, for sure. Do you have concerns over, you've mentioned that a lot of the things you've been working on currently are internal growth, working with this population that you've bought into. Do you have concerns over what happens once all that's been treated and you are going to need some new patients, some people that, have to be coming into the practice, and you're seeing some new dentistry? Do you have like a plan or sort of a crossover point that you're kind of anticipating for that?
Yeah, I'm not really nervous about that. I don't think, I just don't think I'll get there that quickly. I think other problems will arise before that problem.
Yeah.
But again, I think that because my vision is what it is, I'm just going to keep climbing towards that, and I'm going to do my best to kind of knock down any obstacle that gets in the way. So if I do max that out, then like I said, I'm going to grow through acquisition. If I could grow this practice through external marketing and do a 30 $10 million practice, then we'll just take it that way. But I don't think that'll be the case. But going to grow as much as I can internally, and if then start looking a little more heavily towards into acquisitions if that needs to be done. And there are several practices that I estimate will be up for sale within 3 miles of here and over the next 5 years. So that's always on the table for me.
I guess I kind of want to go off of what Tyler was saying. So do you think there's enough patients in the practice as it is now to kind of max out the space? Is that kind of how you're looking at it, or what do you see in there?
To max out my space? Yeah, I definitely think that I think that this practice could get up to, like I said, I was doing 575. Like, I don't think, honestly, over $1 million off of the patients that we have is at all unrealistic with how much is not being diagnosed. And with first thing I did when I got in was print off the the first thing I did when I got in and transferred from the whatever Dentisoft system that they were using into Open Dental was ran a report on Open Dental. Yeah. Cannot recommend Open Dental enough, and see the overdue recall list. And we haven't even gotten tapped into that because I'm still trying to add these hygiene, and we literally can't fill up a hygiene. We fill up a hygiene schedule so quickly. I haven't even started reaching out to those people because we literally have nowhere to put them. And that's why I'm trying to get this hygiene, is because the list was like 14 pages long. Now, granted, most of that is people that haven't been in that are probably no longer patients or deceased, but there's still people that haven't been in a year and a half, 2 years that I'm sure are just waiting for us to contact them. And that's kind of another low hanging fruit that I have hanging over me. So yeah, I think the practice is here. It's just and that's what I said about it happening to be a lot of low hanging fruit and happening to be a ton of growth areas that I wasn't seeking one of those Brady Frank, value add practice for $100,000 that you can try to grow into $1 million. But I do think that there's a ton of growth potential here within the practice, the patients that we have.
All right. So that was the part one of this episode. This turned into a two-parter without us knowing it. And so we wanted to kind of split it up a little bit. And it looks like this first part here was mostly just about, Kevin's whole, trip after his second round of mailers and, transitioning into the practice and how all that went down and some of the fortune and misfortune that was associated with that. And man, I gotta say, it's just so funny how things will line up for people that are just persistent about finding opportunities. And, when I was talking to Kevin back in, January or February, whatever it was, he didn't, he had some things on the line there, but the opportunity he ended up doing wasn't even, really available. And I just thought it was so cool when he was talking about, this was something that, originally to him, it was like the doc said, I don't have anything for you, but let's have lunch. And, Kevin's willingness to do that, turned into this, and this is where he is now. It was really amazing catching up with that.
Yeah, I think it's important. I feel like you can't show how important it is to keep the doors open. And this is a perfect example of it. Like you said, the doctor said they didn't have an opportunity for him, but Kevin still was like, hey, let's grab lunch. I just would love to get to know you. Yeah. And it turned out to be what he ended up doing. So just keeping those doors open and making sure no matter who you're talking to, you're putting your best foot forward, can really go miles and miles as far as getting you to where you want to go.
Yeah. I know we're kind of going off on our own conversation about this, but I agree with you 100%. Fortune favors the persistent. And, if you just judge these opportunities that come along as, how they're presenting to you and how you judge them in that moment, a lot of times you're shutting doors in the future that you don't even know that you're going to be looking for. So that's exactly what he did. And I think he said, at least in this episode or what will be next week's episode, that he always tries to keep doors open, and his mission stays the same, but anything that he can see eventually turning into something that would be worth pursuing, he just keeps that relationship going, and that definitely worked out for him. So I couldn't be happier for him.
Absolutely. Yeah, couldn't have said it better. Hope you guys enjoyed this week's episode and look forward to giving you guys part 2 next week.